Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, including websites such as Cover 32 and Cold Omaha. And you can also find him on more podcasts than we have time to mention. He is Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I've had some odd days lately, but I'm trying to manage, and you never know anymore about professional athletes. One day you think they're normal, and some days you look them up, and they may actually be joining a cult.
Yeah, funny that.
Yeah, funny how that works. If you have time. And we don't have the time or the energy to go fully in depth on it. Do a little Google search about Sammy Watkins and cult, and there's just a full rabbit hole for the rest of your evening. In fact, get off of Vikings Twitter for a while, and that's actually good advice for all of us, and just dive down this little rabbit hole for a little while and have a little bit of fun, because there's something there. But
there's a lot going on. There's a lot of reading material.
Yeah, there is a lot of reading material, so have fun with that. And to transition away from that, we just want to thank all of you who are non-cult members for supporting us through the off season. If you hear value in what we are putting out, you can donate to the show in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/NorseCode, and you can donate to the show there. You can also go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. It's more of a subscription base, like an NPR pledge drive, $1 a month or something like that, or Tree-Fitty if you'd like to keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. And you can also purchase one of those fine Norse Code bumper stickers there as well for $5 a month. So feel free to toss Tree-Fitty our way. Again, we appreciate anything that you guys are willing to donate. It helps us keep the show ad-free and helps us keep the lights on. So, again, thank you guys so much. We are coming back a week early. We've been doing it every 2 weeks this offseason, but we wanted to cover a few things that came up because the offseason has been so busy. As far as free agency goes. So, Arif, the first thing we want to mention as we get into the show here is Sheldon Richardson, who wasn't even on a lot of people's radar as far as the Vikings were concerned, and then we had to restructure a contract and say goodbye to Jarius Wright. So I guess the first question I have to ask is, did we pay an appropriate price for Sheldon Richardson?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's got the capability of being one of the top defensive tackles in the NFL, especially when you add in the fact that he'll be working with Andre Patterson, who he said after 5 minutes of hanging out with him in a film room, he's learned more than he has with, I think he mentioned that he has with other organizations, which it's clearly hyperbole, but it's a good one, right?
Oh, all of a sudden he's being asked to demand excellence.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the difference. But yeah, I think that someone like Andre Patterson has the ability to kind of unlock everything that he is. And we know that some years he's been a really astounding 5 technique. Since I want to say his entry into the league, which I want to say was 2013 or 2014. But since he entered the league, he has been one of the top 5 techniques in the NFL. And he played 3-4 defensive end for most of his NFL career. He played 3 technique tackle with the Seattle Seahawks, and a lot of people consider that a down year. He was actually really good in terms of creating pressure. He just didn't finish and create sacks, something he kind of alluded to in his press conference. But he did a really good job of generating pressure up the middle. And with just a little bit more in terms of coaching and stuff like that, we may be able to see another one of those 5, 6, maybe even 7 sack seasons that he had with the Jets, because he had a 7 sack season that was, I think it was 6 solo sacks and then 2 half sacks. So yeah, he's a really great interior pass rusher, and I think if you take a look at something like his PFF grade over his career against other 5 techniques, cumulative, it's something like 7th best. That's behind guys like J.J. Watt and Muhammad Wilkerson and Leonard Williams, who are also on the Jets, and also pretty good. But, when you compare him to like other 3 techniques, he's kind of in sort of the same area where he's kind of floating around the 5, 6, 7 in terms of like the best in the NFL. So, he's not quite Geno Atkins or Aaron Donald or Fletcher Cox. And Whatever Ndamukong Suh plays for wherever he plays, he's probably not going to be that good. But he's a Pro Bowl quality talent. He's a really, really stunning kind of all-around player that not only has the ability to create that pressure up the middle, but is really stout against the run, which you don't always see in three-technique pass rushers. And one of the issues that the Vikings kind of had with Tom Johnson was that he's really great at putting pressure up the middle, and the Vikings, it sounds like, aren't going to bring him back. The addition of having run defense in there makes it just very difficult, I think, for offenses to kind of figure things out. And it puts the Vikings, I think, back in the conversation for having one of the top defensive lines in the NFL. I know that at the beginning of last season, that was something that we've been talking about for a while, that, hey, compare the Vikings defensive line to, these other defensive line, compare it to the Eagles line, something that people identified before the season, compared to the Seahawks line, I guess they should have also compared it to the Jacksonville line. But you compare it, hey, the Vikings are maybe top 3, right? And I would say that they didn't quite perform up to expectations, especially after the foot injury in London against the Browns for Everson Griffin. Danielle Hunter, I thought, had a really good year, but not, a great year. And Linval Joseph was great, but Tom Johnson, who improved in run defense, didn't bring home as many sacks as would have been nice for us to be able to consider them sort of a top 2, top 3 defensive line. But I think it just puts him back in that conversation, especially with potentially, the healing Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter kind of, he overperformed his sacks relative to pressures, 2 years ago. He underperformed his sacks relative to pressures last year. If he kind of just hits the middle there where his sacks meets the total amount of pressures, then he'll be really good. So this puts the Vikings back in that conversation. They've already got one of the best secondaries in the NFL. It's really great, and I think it puts the Vikings, who were a top 2 defense last year, it puts them in the running to be number 1 again against people like the Eagles and the Saints and the Jaguars.
It's just kind of impressive that we have this just absolutely stout defensive line right now. Like, you could argue that and one name we didn't mention there was Linval Joseph, who had a phenomenal year, especially for stopping the run. So it's one of those situations where how do you run against this team if everyone is playing up to their potential? Like, do you find some way of scheming outside? Like, how do you move the ball on the ground against this?
Well, it's tough. Teams begin to run away from Danielle Hunter, which is just, I think, kind of astounding, given that he's like a rookie, or not a rookie, a young player who's still, I think he's just 23.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you can start to believe your press clippings at that point. Like, people are running away from me. They're scheming away from my.
Right, yeah. And it's astounding because his ability to peel off and get to the edge when they run in his direction is great. He was always a very good run defender, even though he was a situational pass rusher for the Vikings. That's what he was at LSU. He's primarily a run defender. So he's always been very good at that. And so when they run in his direction, his athleticism and his instincts allow him to get off the block really quickly and shut it down. So they have to run basically to the outside towards Everson Griffin, who is a pretty good run defender himself. And so that it's very difficult, I think, now, especially that they've upgraded at 3 technique. It's very difficult to run on this defense. I know there's been a lot of talk, especially this year for some reason. I don't know why, it's been kind of a thing for a while, but there's been a lot more talk, at least on Twitter, about the relative uselessness of the running game. And it's something I've kind of disagreed with for the past couple of years, because we don't get to see the kind of game theory impact that it has, and also the importance of run success rate in particular on football outcomes. But I think, it is important to put, opponents into 3rd and long. And so long as opponents are willing to run the ball, it's good to be able to stop the run to prevent 3rd and manageable type situations. So, I think that it's going to make the Vikings' 3rd down defense, which was already the best in the NFL last year by a pretty significant margin, honestly. It's going to make the Vikings' 3rd down defense even better. And what's crazy is that, when I was exploring, I wrote an article a while back, while I was exploring, what makes the Vikings' 3rd down defense so good, I'd expected to see, they're in 3rd and long a lot more than the league average. And that wasn't the case. They were in 3rd and long about just a little bit above, I think, league average. They put their opponents into 3rd and long situations not that much more often than you'd expect for an average team. So This, I think, increases their ability to do that, and they are an astounding third and long defense. And I think that's where we're going to see those gains. And the Vikings, I mean, they had like a historic third down defense, something like 25%. It's one of the best third down rates we've seen in the NFL.
Yeah, since the stats started to be collected, yeah.
Yeah, like 1991. So this puts them in an even better situation. Now, I mean, obviously, when you set a record like that, it's more likely that you're going to regress back towards, being really good instead of historically good. But, when you make moves like this, you can begin to eye the record again. Like it's pretty great. I think the signing really does a lot to set the tone for the defense, and it also allows them, because of that quick pressure, to paper up potentially a hole that they'll have at cornerback or something like that.
Yeah, it's a very intriguing pickup to be sure. But we did have to say goodbye to Jarius Wright, who is now who was signed almost immediately by the Carolina Panthers and their offensive coordinator Norv Turner. And Panthers fans are still a little miffed about the whole addition of Norv Turner to their team. And the addition of Jarius Wright, while he is an excellent receiver and is going to be missed in Minnesota, especially on third down, boy, that's I feel like there's enough gadget players on that Carolina team.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious as to where Wright is going to slot in for them because Curtis Samuel's coming back. And presumably he's going to be the slot receiver again like he was before he was injured. And Wright for the Vikings has largely been a slot player. He's taken some end arounds. He's done, reverses and stuff like that. I think he almost had a pass attempt once. But, for the most part, he's been kind of a slot receiver that's played a possession role later in his Vikings career. Early in his Vikings career, he was very sort of like a speedster from the slot, kind of like Cruz, what's his name from the Giants?
Victor Cruz.
Yeah, Victor Cruz. He's kind of a speed slot guy for a while, and then he became a possession guy like he was at Arkansas. I don't really know, because if he's a speed guy, then he's going to be behind Torrey Smith from that perspective, and he's going to be kind of a slot guy. They're going to have to maybe field 4 receivers or something, which is not something they like to do in Carolina. But maybe with Norv Turner. Well, actually, Turner didn't like to do that either. So,
no, Norv Turner hated to do things like that. And
it was very 3 receivers or 2 receivers, and that's kind of where you are.
And looking at the way that Turner tends to scheme things out, you could argue, okay, well, they have him with the idea that they're going to turn him into kind of a I realize this he's no longer in the league, but more of like a Percy Harvin, Cordell Patterson type of role. But he's never been that guy, and he's never been that. He's fast. He's just not that level of fast. So you're kind of stuck with this, with no disrespect to him, this B+ receiver being thrust into in a system that doesn't really have a good place for him.
Yeah, I think he's mostly going to be depth for them. And I'm kind of surprised, but he mentioned on Twitter or on Instagram, I guess, but he linked to it through his Twitter, that one of the reasons he signed is because he's reuniting with Norv and he knows what he would do in Norv's system. The question, of course, is what he's going to do with that depth chart. Because obviously Devin Funchess is receiver number 1. He's a very good receiver. And, people are probably going to make comparisons to Michael Irvin and, because of Norv Turner, and, he's going to run the bang 8, which, the Vikings haven't had Norv Turner do that because they haven't had the receiver capable of doing that. But yeah, I don't know. And you think about like gadget players, and I don't know, they have Joe Webb there. I think he's still under contract somehow. And you talk about speed. I mean, that's a guy with 4.3 speed. I mean, Percy Harvin, Cordell Patterson, 4.3 type speed. I mean, Jarius Wright's fast, but if he's not that fast, he's a 4.42 guy.
Joe Webb actually is signed with the Bills at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. We'll see what he does there, I guess. How is he still in the league?
People remember that Thursday night game. I'm telling you, they remember that Thursday night game in Philly. Was it a Tuesday night game?
It was a Tuesday night game.
That's right. It was the Tuesday night game. Yeah.
Which is also one of Antoine Winfield's best games too.
Yeah. No doubt there.
Right. That's wild. I mean, like, he can't do anything. I mean, he's a great guy. I don't hate him or anything. I was really excited about him for a while, but he can't do anything. I guess they have a pretty good history of like quarterback converts in Buffalo, right? Because they had Brad Smith there too.
Yeah.
I
forget if he's actually. I was gonna say I forget if he's like fully signed there or if it was just last year. But he last played for the Bills, so good for him. But yeah, Jarius Wright.
Yeah, he's going to be an asset, and it's good to have depth, especially when someone like Curtis Samuel does have potential propensity to be injured. Torrey Smith hasn't been healthy his whole career, and if he can slot into either of those roles as a backup, he might end up being pretty valuable for them. So. Yeah, I'm happy for him. I always had the sense that the Vikings were not super on board with the contract that they signed with him, which is not to say they didn't like him. They liked him a lot, actually. They've always wanted to keep him kind of in around and on their team. And the locker room really likes him too. But there were rumors that he was going to be traded last offseason. He ends up getting cut this offseason, and the Vikings wanted to bring him back at a lower price. Mm-hmm. But he decided to go with Turner, where he knows what he'll be asked to do, as opposed to with a completely new offensive coordinator in DiFilippo. So, it kind of sucks because I think it kind of exposes something that we kind of already knew about the Vikings depth chart, especially because it doesn't look like they're going to bring Michael Floyd back, which is that the Vikings may have the best receiver tandem in the NFL, but they've got some serious depth concerns. A lot of people have been telling me they really believe, Laquan Treadwell is going to break out. He's going to take, that third receiver role, and he's going to be pretty valuable for them in that role. And I respect the kind of faith that takes, but I think that there's not very good evidence that that's going to be the case. I think Wright ended up with more yards than Treadwell, despite playing half as many snaps. And I think that's pretty indicative of kind of the problem, because a lot of people will be like, well, Case Keenum, he primarily only targeted, Diggs and Thielen, which makes sense because they're, the best receiver tandem in the league. And so he didn't get an opportunity to target someone like Treadwell, who's open. And I'm very sympathetic to that argument. But when other receivers are on the field, like Jarius Wright, he gets more targets on passing plays when Diggs and Thielen are already on the field. So it's pretty clear that in the progression of the route that, whatever it is, wherever Wright is, maybe he's the second read, maybe he's the third read, kind of based on which sort of half field read Keenum has to make. He was more, willing to go in that direction, despite having fewer snaps to work with. So I don't have a lot of faith that Treadwell is going to break out and be an interesting third receiver. I did a piece on his rookie year about like how often do first round rookies, or I expanded it to first and second round rookies, but how often do first and second round rookies, bounce back after a bad year? I found that you have to have at least some production unless there's like a serious injury concern, which there might have been, but I don't think it was all that serious. There's very few instances where somebody has a year as poor as Treadwell does and comes back. People talk about, these receivers that did break out in their third year, like, Victor Cruz that we just mentioned. Demaryius Thomas is a good example. I think Eric Decker broke out in his second year. Just to go back to like a Broncos receiver. There used to be a 3-receiver rule. First, that rule doesn't really apply anymore. Receivers tend to produce pretty well in their first year. They don't produce kind of up to their potential in their first year, but they tend to produce pretty well if they end up having a good career. And by their second year, they almost certainly, put some yards in. I do think that there is some context you have to give for, someone like Thielen and Diggs, crowding up all those targets, but I really think that that's a problem, and I think the Vikings need to sort of more aggressively attack that third receiver position when they have the opportunity to. I don't know how they're going to do it. It doesn't sound like there's any interesting kind of free agents out there that could fill out that depth chart. I think Wright was probably immediately the best receiver on the market when he hit the market. I would have to double check that. I don't know that for a fact, but that's kind of worth bringing up. But beyond that, they don't have a ton of draft picks either. I mean, if the Vikings trade down, like, a bunch of people are saying they might or they should trade down from 30 to say 36 or 37 into the second round, pick up another third or fourth rounder in the process, then maybe you can pick up a receiver in the fourth round. I mean, that's where they got Jarius Wright. That's where a lot of teams take chances. That's where I think the entire Arkansas group went. I think that's where Joe Adams went, and that's where Greg Childs went. I think that's where they've gotten a couple of their good tight ends. I want to say Well, fifth round was where they got Rhett Ellison, and David Morgan, I think, was also the fifth round. But yeah, somewhere around there, you might be able to find some interesting pass catchers. I wouldn't say that this receiver class is particularly deep, but I don't know as much about that as a lot of other people. I'm not high on it as far as that goes, so I don't really know what they're going to do for that receiver role. Maybe Caleb Jones steps up. I really liked what he did at camp. And by the end of camp, he was kind of putting together a lot of steam, and he ends up, making the team, which is kind of nice. But that spot's going to be wide open. Maybe we'll have a bunch of interesting undrafted free agents as well. But yeah, having Jarius Wright, let go is, I don't like it, but that's where we are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is one of those side effects of the situation, and it's hard because I was a big fan of Jarius Wright. I was one of those people who was a part of the free Jarius Wright movement. Like one of those people who thought he should get more targets or at least more catches out of it. He needed to put on the gold gloves. That way Keenum knew that he should throw to him.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The only people who were catching balls from Keenum had the gold gloves on them. Diggs, Thielen, and Rudolph. So, but moving aside for just a moment from the defense and the signing of Sheldon Richardson, let's talk about Trevor Siemian signing as a backup. I suppose this means that they're thinking Sloter isn't ready to be a QB2.
I think it's, kind of insurance. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they had a legitimate competition between Sloter and Siemian, which they've both seen before, right?
Yeah, as it turns out, yes.
But yeah, and I would say that they're going to give Sloter a shot. But, they gave up assets for Siemian. Not a ton of assets. Not like, they gave up the farm or anything. They gave up like a 7th-round pick and got a pick back. Or, yeah, something like that. Or they got a 7th and they gave up a future 5th, which is essentially a 6th. Yeah, so, they didn't give up a ton of assets. They essentially traded back in the draft. But it's clear that they at least somewhat valued him enough that they weren't willing to pursue a free agent in the market. And so maybe there's a concern that, or not even a concern, just a thought that maybe Sluter wouldn't be ready. It'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays out. But I think if Sluter genuinely does beat him out in camp, and I think he's going to get second-team reps in camp, that's something that they'll consider. Worth noting is I think Siemian had nearly identical stats to Case Keenum before Keenum signed with the Vikings. And his scouting report actually reads somewhat similarly. Now, he's not as aggressive as Keenum, but he's got arm strength issues. His deep passes tend to get underthrown, which are actually unrelated issues. But they sometimes they tend to get paired together like that. The same thing is true of Keenum. Arm strength issues, deep passes tend to get underthrown. The issue is I think Siemian probably has a weaker arm even. And so his throws to the outside kind of die a little bit. But he's pretty accurate, especially on those intermediate and short passes. He's got some mobility to him. I don't think as much. I think he may have tested better as an athlete than Keenum, but I think on the field he doesn't show as much mobility. And he doesn't kind of have a natural feel for where to go, whereas that's kind of what saved Keenum a lot. So as a backup, he is a backup. Like when the Vikings signed Keenum, I was happy because I thought, hey, it's a pretty appropriate backup. But at the same time, I was pretty upset when it looked like Keenum was going to have to start more than one game. And I'd be kind of upset in the same vein if it was Trevor Siemian. But who knows, right? They turned an all-star performance out of Keenum. They may be able to do that in kind of the worst-case scenario in a world where they do have to play Siemian for a couple of games. And, of course, you've got DeFilippo there who was able to prep Nick Foles for a playoff run in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot, but, he's a quick decision maker. He's smart. He's really good to have in the quarterback room. But, I don't think he necessarily has all the tools he needs, and he can't be a dynamic threat throwing the ball or running the ball. So kind of a pedestrian signing. Had some good games as a starter in Denver. So, all worth noting, I think. It's
worth noting, and we've certainly made fun of him enough on the show that it's kind of an odd signing as far as that goes, but
right.
We'll see how it ends up turning out in training camp, and if he ends up number 2 or number 3. He's obviously not going to be outplaying Kirk Cousins or anything, but it's worth mentioning, if nothing else, that we acquired Trevor Siemian, and we're not going to be paying nearly as much money as he's had the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So,
I imagine Simeon's going to have a better camp performance than Keenum did. I mean, Keenum's training camp was just abysmal. Yeah. Like, it was so bad. You saved by the fact that Taylor Heineke's was like worse, but it was not great. It turned it around, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
as it turns out, what? Training camp doesn't matter? No. We're not saying anything like that, but we are saying that Kai Forbath has returned to the Vikings. So Kai Forbath, I believe he was the first free agent to re-sign with the Vikings this year. So Kai is back. We are theoretically not signing we're not going to be drafting a kicker with pick number 30.
Yeah, probably not. You don't have your all-world kicker prospects in this year's draft anyway. So.
No. There's the ghost of Al Davis isn't screaming in anyone's ear to pick a kicker in the first round this year.
Right. So it's. I wouldn't be surprised if they grabbed an undrafted free agent kicker, though. I don't know any of the names of any of them, but it's probably something that'll happen. There's probably going to be some level of camp competition. But yeah, they re-signed Kai Forbath. I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much to say. I know some Vikings fans are like not super happy with it, but I mean, I think most Vikings fans are like, yeah, he's been all right. Can't always upgrade at that position, so there you go.
Well, yeah, and everyone else is thinking something along the lines of, well, at least he's not Blair Walsh, because the Seahawks fans hate Blair Walsh.
Imagine that.
I know, right? It's not like he had just this great what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like he didn't have this great big exposure of where his problems were, and just this demo reel of missed kicks. But oh well. Yeah, the Seahawks their SB Nation site, Field Gulls, actually published an article that I had retweeted on the Norse Code page about the just absolute hatred and a breakdown of the kicks of Blair Walsh and whether or not they should actually be keeping him. It's a really good read. But yeah, it was just like, wow, they really do dislike this guy. It's a darn shame, because Blair Walsh seemed like a nice guy. He just had one problem. It happened.
Bad at football?
He was bad at football. He was bad at the thing that he was supposed to be doing professionally. So last thing we want to mention before we hit the mailbag is that Tom Compton looks to be a possible addition to our offensive line. He was signed along with Josiah Price and Nick Dooley.
Yeah, Tom Compton, Roseville, Minnesota native, should be kind of a fun story to cover in camp. He needed a lot of development coming out of college, but he is a pretty good run blocker and technically sound as a pass protector. There's actually not a ton of like super big weak points in his game. It's just that the things he's good at, he's not great at. So actually, it's probably a pretty smart signing from the perspective of like a draft or of a developmental guy and a guy that can legitimately compete for a backup spot. I mean, like a lot of guys that you bring into camp can't really legitimately compete for a backup spot. And that includes people like, when Mike Remmers was initially brought to Vikings camp quite a while ago, which, I mean, I'm glad he's been able to turn it around and turn into like a legitimate starting option at two different positions. But yeah, he seems like a guy that's just going to be stable. I mean, he's not an overwhelmingly powerful run blocker. He's a pretty good one. He's not an overwhelmingly clean pass protector, but he's a pretty good one. So it's, he could get cut in camp just because he doesn't have a standout quality, but at the same time, I could see him making a roster. Josiah Price was in camp last year. He's more of a blocking tight end, played for, I think, Michigan State, accounted for a surprising amount of their total team yards. Like, I think he only had like 387 yards at Michigan State, but they didn't throw the ball that much that year. So he accounted for a good percentage of them. Like 14.7%, which is like higher than about half the tight ends in any draft class. So that's nice. But for the most part, he's a blocking tight end. It's kind of like a David Morgan situation where he had decent routes, pretty good hands, and was the only kind of real receiving threat for a while. So he ended up being kind of an important receiver for them. But in the NFL, he doesn't have the athleticism to really get out and open in space. And I don't think his hands are nearly as good as David Morgan's, and he's not as good of a blocker as David Morgan. But it's kind of the same role. And then Nick Dooley is a long snapper who was in camp last year, and cool.
Not much more to say on that, I suppose.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, we've seen what happens when long snappers go down and they don't have a backup. But
we can't just grab Jared Allen from the sidelines anymore.
Right, exactly. There's no. I think Josiah Price is also a backup long snapper, but I could be confusing that with any number of other tight ends that have existed.
Yeah.
So it's like they got 2 long snappers. Good job.
Go team. So this isn't going to be a terribly long episode, but we do have some excellent questions in the mailbag to bring in here. First question is about a former Viking from Andrew Williams, who asks, Cordarrelle Patterson on the Patriots, cut before the season starts? All pro? What are we thinking?
Well, if it's only between those 2 choices, I would say cut before the season starts. But I would imagine that he's got a pretty good shot at being the kick returner and potentially a gunner. Alongside Matthew Slater.
He is a hell of a gunner.
He's really good at it.
I remember tweeting responding to some tweet he had put out where he showed the picture the first day he was a gunner. He had shown a picture of the tackle he had made, and I made some comment about dude can celebrate all he wants about this. That was a phenomenal hit. And he's immediately retweet. I would be in my mentions too if I made a play that good.
Yeah, right. He's good at it. They did re-sign Matthew Slater, who is kind of if they made a Hall of Fame of punt gunners, he would be on it. Maybe kind of the first inductee. There's 2 gunner positions, so it's not he got crowded out or anything, but it does kind of reduce his risk of sticking around just by virtue of being a special teams all-star. But I would love for him to be the kick returner there, and he actually be allowed to kind of return kicks. I know with the new NFL rule, it's just so rare that we see interesting kick returns. But I don't know if anyone can do it. It's him. He's the best one I've ever seen. Yeah. It would be really cool if he could kind of establish himself as the clear-cut best kick returner of all time. I mentioned this on Twitter, and a bunch of people got up at my mentions because I was he could dethrone Gale Sayers, kind of with Bill Belichick. That'd be kind of fun. And people are Gale Sayers. It's not Gale Sayers. It's Devin Hester or Joshua Cribbs or Mel Gray. And
Joshua Cribbs doesn't belong in that conversation.
I don't think so either. I was astounded. I was he was good. For a long time too.
If you're gonna,
I guess.
Joshua Cribbs does not belong in the same breath as Devin Hester as far as return guys though.
Right. Well, it's bringing up I just had a really good one. I forgot it. But it's like bringing up Frank Gore in the history of running backs. He was pretty good. Not really going to compare him to Walter Payton or anything.
The best running backs of all time. You're talking you're talking Adrian Peterson. You're talking Frank Gore. You're talking wait, what?
Yeah, it's you Jim Brown and Barry Sanders and Frank Gore and Walter Payton. Wait, back up.
Yeah, you can actually. It's like the party where the record the needle goes off of the record skirt. Wait, what? Even Zach Morris says timeout to that. I don't.
Yeah, right. and here's the thing though. Devin Hester was actually all around as a returner, he's phenomenal, and I think he should get into the Hall of Fame. But mostly he made his way as a punt returner. As a kick returner, he was above average. He was better than your Eric Weems's and Marcus Sherrill's the kick returner version, and so on. But as a kick returner, he's mostly above average. As a punt returner though, and he's kind of phenomenal. Which, given that, I think it really just kind of narrows down who you can say is actually in the conversation as some of the best kick returners of all time, which, by the way, also include Percy Harvin. If he had a career long enough. Yeah. Joe McKnight has had a couple of great years. Rip. As a kick returner, he actually does, I think, belong in the conversation. Gale Sayers, obviously. But, Cordell Patterson. I mean, there's only 3 people who averaged over 28 yards kick return, which not a great stat because of how the rule changes and how, impacting field position is more important and all that. But still, it's kind of interesting to note that Gale Sayers, Cordell Patterson, and Joe Kapp are the only 3 to average above 28. So yeah, I think Patterson definitely belongs in that conversation. And I think he's got a couple of years of the Patriots special teams are famously good. So if he's got a couple of years to return kicks for them, I don't really care what he does from the line of scrimmage. That sounds fun as hell. Get 8 touchdowns. I don't care that it's the Patriots and I hate the Patriots. Just get 8 touchdowns. Be fun.
No, exactly. The league is more fun with Cordell Patterson in it and doing well. And if it happens to be for that team, then fine. But
exactly, yeah.
As long as it's not an NFC North rival, I'm fine with this. So
exactly, that's not you don't have to see him return kicks against you. That's great.
Oh yeah,
great news.
Yeah. It's kind of like Ndamukong Suh deciding between the Rams and the Titans and being you should just play for the Titans. I feel like you haven't spent enough time.
They've got a guy with the Rams. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Titans, you can get 1,000 snaps. It's fun.
You can get all of the snaps. You can just rake them over the coals for the amount of money and bonuses. And that division is awful. Just take a moment, Ndamukong Suh, and just look at the offensive lines there for that division. You may be putting up just record numbers for sacks and pressures there.
You might be responsible for 2 quarterback deaths. Anyway, you can sign with them because of that.
You're going to be responsible for so many old-timey Andrew Luck parody account tweets.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Think about this before you try to sign in LA.
Right. Plus, if the Titans go over the salary cap, is anyone going to notice?
No. I don't. Most people don't even know there's a team in there.
Right. So, yeah.
So Ian asks, do you think the lack of known interest in offensive line during free agency is more of an indictment of what's left to choose from, or their confidence in draft depth and what's already on the roster, or something in between?
That's kind of curious. I just don't think that there were that many interesting offensive linemen. I know people are well, you could sign Zach Fulton, you could sign Andrew Norwell. There's Justin Pugh. There's one other besides that. But honestly, there was not a ton that fit the system. Pugh would have fit the system. He would have been nice at guard. And maybe you have to decide between Pugh or Sheldon Richardson. And to me, it's just Sheldon Richardson, what? So I think that's part of it, is that if you've got a couple of big swings left in free agency, it makes way more sense to go for the clearly more obviously talented guys. Now, Andrew Norwell was the best guard available in the market, but I don't think that he was a very good system fit. So in order for you to get him, you'd have to overpay him. Whatever did Jacksonville get him, I think? Whatever they're paying him, they're likely going to get their money back because they'll run the system that both he and Fournette are comfortable with. But the Vikings, they would have to pay the same or maybe even more because taxes or whatever. And they wouldn't be getting as much in return because they're going to be playing him out of position. He would do fine in a zone style running scheme, but he wouldn't do as well. And so I think that probably plays a role as well. But yeah, it's you could get a pretty good guard for $7 million, or you could get a really great defensive tackle for $8 million. Oh, really? Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Because Sheldon, he's got $3 million in incentives, so he could hit 11.
Yeah.
But I think his cap hit's only 8.
Yeah.
And the Vikings don't have a ton of room to make other signings. Now, they are going after depth guys like Tom Compton, who I think was a pretty smart signing. But yeah, I think, they'll go after some guys in the draft. I don't know if it's an indication of that. I think that they're kind of letting, these opportunities come to them and kind of playing it by ear and adapting to kind of what's happening around them. But yeah, maybe they could have signed Josh Sitton. That would be cool. That wants to consistently get younger. It's kind of, you end up with a better version of the Joe Berger problem where you're was he going to retire this year? You're going to get more back from it, but you'd still have to figure that out. So I think that all is kind of part of the package as to why they didn't pursue any clearly starting offensive linemen. It does sound like they're pursuing Joe Berger, kind of conditional upon whether or not he's going to retire. So it's not as if they're unconcerned, right? But I do think, they're probably going to get a couple of guys competing for spots in the third wave of free agency, however we want to define that, and in the draft.
So I have a very interesting question here. Caleb Arndt asks, is balsamic vinegar on vanilla ice cream for heathens? If not, which other unlikely food combinations are surprisingly good? I have actually never tried balsamic vinegar on vanilla ice cream before.
I have. It's delicious. I was really surprised. I went to it's a relatively new restaurant in Minneapolis, Young Joni. It's so phenomenal, by the way. They also do pizzas, and I think it's the thing that they feature on the menu. I haven't had a pizza there yet. I've been there twice. But their other food is just great, so I just keep going for it. But I imagine their pizza is also really good. But yeah, it's a really good, exciting restaurant, and typically we're not super excited about dessert. I like dessert more than Chelsea does. But we asked them what they had for dessert, and they were like, "Oh, we've got homemade vanilla ice cream." And I was like, yeah, whatever. You've got a baked pie or something. I'll have that instead. Maybe it comes with a homemade ice cream, right? And then she said, with balsamic and olive oil. And I was like, what? Well,
feel like your ears perked up. How is that a thing? All right.
Right. So we got it. It was the cheapest dessert too. So we got it. And it was just delicious. And I think we had one I thought it was going to be both balsamic and olive oil, kind of like a vinaigrette, which would be weird. But one had balsamic and one had olive oil, and both were just delicious. They were just so good. So yeah, really good. Other combinations, a couple of years ago I would have said avocado and everything, but avocado's kind of become the new bacon, except it's also a joke about millennials.
Yes.
So I can't really say that, but avocado ice cream's really good for in the ice cream category. I don't know, there's a bunch of weird stuff that works out.
I dated a girl in high school who had this very odd and very specific combination for snack food, and it was Ritz crackers. It was made like a sandwich, so it was Ritz crackers. That spray cheese you put on.
Okay.
And
that is appropriate to Ritz, I guess.
Yeah. And Skittles in the middle.
Whoa.
So you get your sweet and you get a savory. I am here to say that I have had it, and it was surprisingly delicious.
Wow, really?
It was actually really good.
Oh,
it was not something I was expecting, but in fact, just going to the grocery store, and she picked those three things up, and I just went, I'm trying to figure out how they work, but okay. And then we had them, and I was like, okay, well, this is just now going to be a thing.
Well, I guess if you think of it as because there are fruit infused cheeses.
There are.
I've had a goat cheese with raspberry in it on a cracker. If you just think this is an alternate version of that.
Yeah, this is kind of cheaper. A trailer version of it, but it.
Well, I wasn't going to say it, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
But I can see how it works then, right? Yeah. Because you've got kind of a fruitiness coming from because they extract the fruit sugars and mix them with other sugars and put them into Skittles.
Oh God, your left foot will go numb. Once you have it, let's not mince words here. This is okay. Yeah. This is the left, or rather the right step into the world of diabetes. But it was odd, but it was really good. So years later, long after she and I had split, I was in another relationship, and I think I was actually living in the cities when this had happened. I found myself at I think I found myself at Cub, and I was like, you know what, I haven't had in a really long time, and my girlfriend at the time was just horrified. It's like, how could you possibly do this? Why would you put this into your body like this? And we brought it home, and I made one for her, and she went, I still don't understand it. It was good, but this is like the flaming. This is like the flaming Homer of, of things. Like the only thing that I didn't do was light it on fire and say fire made it good.
I guess one last thing. So this is not that weird, I think, but my brother was like super surprised that it worked. He's also got like some weird food opinions. So that might be why. But, using Coke in basically anything, I think, is usually a positive as a cooking ingredient.
Yeah, Coke or Dr. Pepper. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I have mixed Coke with melted butter and used it to baste ham. Oh, my God, it's amazing.
That makes an excellent glaze.
And then I've also a couple of, let's say 2 weeks ago while we were still moving in, we made cream cheese wontons. We fried them up. We didn't have a dipping sauce. And so, I put like soy sauce and sesame oil and a little bit of pepper. And I was like, oh, this like needs like a vinegar of some sort. Usually it's rice wine vinegar and brown sugar that you throw in there. And I was like, I had neither of those things. So I put in a little bit of Coke, enough to get the acidity from the vinegar and the sweetness from the brown sugar, but not enough to overwhelm the soy sauce that you could just taste Coke. And that was delicious. And then we also ended up using that as a glaze for chicken like 2 days later. Amazing. So, keep those in mind.
Just a couple more questions before we finish up. Let's go with Luke Braun, who asks, which Viking, current or former, is least likely to be a human being?
John Randall, I would say, is
John Randall's a good choice.
Yeah.
What's the name of? Is it Carl Eller who is the Hall of Famer who used to beat up police?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Carl Eller definitely is a possible person for that. Although I'm still of the belief that Jared Allen isn't necessarily human.
Yeah, Jared Allen was actually one of the first that came to mind. I like that we're all thinking of defensive linemen. Jared Allen was also one that came to mind. But, so I went to Jared Allen. My first thought when I saw this question, I was like, wait, there's a more Jared Allen person. It's John Randall.
Someone more Jared Allen than Jared Allen. Even though you could argue that Jared Allen had the Samson issue of he cut his hair and he lost his power.
It's true. How did John Randall do after he had to stop wearing face paint? Like, do you think the same thing happened?
He fell off for sure, but you could point to age and not a lack of paint on his face. But
who knows? We'll never know.
Well, it's hard to judge something like that scientifically, if nothing else.
I guess Joe Kapp. I was trying to think of maybe not defensive linemen, and I couldn't think of any offensive linemen that really fit the bill. I guess maybe Bryant McKinney, but mostly for other reasons.
Mostly for sex boat reasons.
Right. But Joe Kapp, I could see that, just insanely tough and not really sure. Like, if you watch some of the highlights from like the '69 Vikings season, it's like, how does he throw the ball? That's weird. Yeah, so there's a little bit of that. Also, he has like a CFL beef, which is like the most amazing thing.
Let's go.
I have to tell the story.
Okay.
I wish I knew the details of this beef because the story would be way better. But and I could Google it, but I won't. But so he, he's kind of a legend in the CFL, and he's a bunch of Grey Cup appearances. There's another quarterback, an opposing quarterback, that he had a rivalry with, and not a quarterback, maybe a linebacker, but he had a rivalry with someone. I think they must have hit him on a return or something like that, or he hit them on an interception or something along those lines. Something on the field happened, and he called it a dirty hit, and so they kept this beef forever. And like 50 years later,
I remember this, yeah,
right, at a CFL ceremony. So they're both old as hell, right? Maybe even 60 years later, at a CFL ceremony, they play that clip of the dirty hit, and Joe Kapp stands up, and he challenges that dude to a fight. Right there, which is like the most Joe Kapp thing.
Like retirement home wrestling, basically.
Right. Yeah. And the guy, like, he's not going to back down. He gets up. And the best part is that nobody stops them. Just amazing.
No, this was a Robin Ventura, like Nolan Ryan situation. Like this fight was inevitable. This fight was a long time coming.
You're right. Yeah, it's like they need to get it out, otherwise they're going to be fighting in heaven, man. We got to let this happen.
This is the hockey situation. We got to let them do it now, otherwise the rest of this whole match is going to go to hell.
Right. So so they just fought. Like, two 80-year-old men are just fighting each other for something that happened 60 years ago.
No, I definitely remember that. You can actually find an article, and I believe the video of that on Deadspin. That truly exists. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
So good.
Kyle Slaby asks, we always ask you guys factual or opinion-based questions, but you're people too. I want to know how you're doing. Are you feeling healthy? How you doing?
I'm not really healthy, but I'm feeling fine, I guess.
I'm not really healthy, but
I've been eating better in terms of like, so like my diet is usually like, oh, this is really great restaurant, really good restaurant food. Pay like through the nose at these really nice restaurants and like tweet about it or whatever. We go to like Heyday and Young Joni and
hashtag sponsor hashtag Blue Door.
Yeah, and hashtag sponsored hashtag Blue Door. And, like the Bachelor Farm or like some really good restaurants, or we'll have like a frozen pizza. And so that's like
feast or famine situation there.
You're right. And it's like we've like sat down.
There's no middle ground. Like there's no Little Caesars at all involved there. That would be off of your brand.
Right. Oh yeah. So we talked about it. We're like, okay, so should we try for like an average amount of food that costs an average amount and is an average quality? And we thought about it and we're like, no, it's gonna be like Kraft mac and cheese and then like a 4-star restaurant. Like those are our two things for the week.
And it happens to be for the week because you spent all your money at that first place.
Right. Exactly.
Be like, well, we could go to Devani's and then be able to afford food for, Wednesday.
Right. But no, we don't. We don't do that. So I eat pretty unhealthy because of that split. Because it turns out it takes a lot of cheap food to make up the expensive food. So I'm not eating super healthy, but I'm feeling fine. Moved into the new place. Love it. Zone coverage is kind of lifting off, which is great. Love working for them. So yeah, thanks for the question.
You're doing all right. I'm surviving. I'm not doing terribly poorly, I suppose. Although I did have a few day span there where I both got food poisoning and threw my back out within like days of each other. So that was super fun to deal with. That was fun for everyone involved. Yeah, not Jesus. Yeah. My son going, "Are you okay?" No, sir, I am not. I am not doing fine.
But and I may never be.
I may never be. Who knows? But no, I seem to be doing fairly well. I'm not complaining, and the fact that school is about to end is going to make my job a lot easier. But the build up to it is going to suck. So I'm looking forward to all of that. Don from Ohio asks, who do you see the Vikings signing for veteran secondary help?
I would have to double check to see kind of who's still out there, but I mean, Leon Hall, I'm pretty sure is still out there. That would be kind of interesting. Replace, Terrence Newman with a different aging veteran that's worked under Zimmer. But I think he's still available. That would be kind of interesting. He's worked in the slot a lot. So, if you have to go there, you can go there. Let's see. Byron Maxwell might be available. You can't play him in the slot or anything, but in the right system, he plays pretty well. That he could be a depth guy because he's had a really good set of years in Seattle.
He could be inserted. It would just be kind of hard to find a real good place for him.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But
he's talent. You just don't know where the hell to put him.
Right. But with Xavier Rhodes dipping out of 4 games halfway through because injury, you think about it.
the inevitable halftime rest for him.
Right. Yeah. It's well, he didn't really miss 2 games because you look at the stat sheet, he played 16 games, but he over time he accumulated 2 games worth of missed time. Something like that. I think Brandon Boykin might still be available. He's kind of a pretty good slot guy. And if that's the case, that'd be kind of cool. TJ Carey, he did all right for the Raiders. I mean, I keep on like describing these guys in like glowing terms, like all right and okay, but we are talking about depth in secondary. So you're not going to get a great player, but there are players that have the potential to be unlocked. Someone like, he played over Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl, Johnson Batamosi. That would be interesting. You could take like, those first and second round guys that didn't work out for their former teams, people like Philip Gaines and Bleedy Ray Wilson, who just were bad. But you could, see if, what made them first rounders is still there. So there's a couple of players out there.
Last two questions here, and I definitely like the last one. The second one's pretty good too. Or the first one here is, if a teenager threatened bodily harm on you with fists and threw the first punch at you, would you hit him back?
What? I mean, am I reasonably threatened? Like, I imagine there's a bunch of teenagers out there that could take me. Like, they don't have like the greatest, but
there's actually a list. and they're all Chad Greenway fans.
But
we're gonna get
I
that,
imagine
Arif.
there's also like a good set of teenagers that do not remotely pose a risk, and so I probably wouldn't fight back, right? I don't want to like catch the law for beating up a kid.
Oh, screw that.
Right. So, but I mean, it's not like the law wouldn't be on my side if like this teenager legitimately posed a physical threat. The size of the threat obviously matters too, because if it's a huge threat, I'm leaving, right? I'm just like, I'll take my chances on foot.
You're going to nope out of there like a millennial, yeah.
Right, exactly. I've got avocado toast to get to. But I guess, if it's like a semi-reasonable threat that if I don't do anything about it, could cause problems for me. Like I don't have a great back. I haven't thrown it like you, but I've got some back issues. I don't want to exacerbate those, so I'll throw down.
I like how this question and the next one are kind of related, in a manner of speaking. If I was in that sort of situation, it would really just depend on like how hard I was hit.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
like exactly. I'm an ogre of a human being. So like, if I was hit legitimately hard and like I needed to take a step back, like, really, this is where we're going with this. Now, obviously, I wouldn't do it if it was my own son because, that ends up turning into a whole different, situation. But if we're just, out in a Walmart parking lot someplace and we're gonna throw down,
count.
Where you're legally allowed to just get into as many shouting fights and arguments as you want and throw punches, presumably. I haven't checked the statute on that, but it's probably true. But anyway, I would probably try to like avoid it or just kind of like look at them and just go, are you really sure you want to dig your own grave in this situation? Like, I'm 6'5", like 300 pounds. Like, are you really like trying to do something stupid here?
Yeah,
I'd play the ogre card because I've played it for the majority of my life.
I don't quite have the same specific.
That is not the same specific set of skills that you have. Right.
I don't,
Can't just fall back on that.
I would like to think of myself as more intellectually intimidating.
Which really just means I'm just going to roast your ass on Twitter later.
Yeah, right. It was like, if you do this, man, I'm coming at you on Twitter.
You wouldn't believe this teenager who was throwing punches at me and the shoes he had on. Please.
I'm just taking crossers to the face, but I'm like taking a video. Like, what are those?
Somebody in the background just screaming. It's not Source. It's Gold Star. Gold Star. Okay. So this last question is of importance because it could potentially be a thing minus the money side of things. Don from Ohio asks, finally, if I gave you $10,000, would you go to the Vikings-Eagles Thursday night game in full Vikings clothing and stay for the whole game?
Jesus.
I would go.
I could really use $10,000.
I would go.
It's not the same for you, ogre.
Also, that is not a nickname that needs to catch on. Because I know a guy nicknamed that, and that's not cool. But
you mean aside from Ogre from Revenge of the Nerds?
Exactly, yes. But no, I would totally go. I would go if somebody just bought a ticket and a plane ticket. Like, I would go.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably go, but I've got a thin skin, man. I want to hear from Eagles fans.
Yeah, you'd be fine. I have a feeling it'd be like one of those situations. All right, so you wouldn't go solo. But if you had someone, so if you had somebody with you, like if you and I went to the game, which if people donate enough money to the show, we would consider it. I think I can speak for Arif on that.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Actually,
that would be a hell of a lot of fun. NFL opening night, sure. But if we ended up in that sort of situation, I imagine it would be a lot like the old cartoon where it was like the kind of the slower, like bigger dog, and then the shorter dog going, "What are we doing, Spike?" Like just kind of bouncing around the bigger one, just like. You're like, well, if anything happened, the big dog would end up taking care of the situation. But like, I have a feeling you would at least have the dexterity of being able to like, or the ability to just like duck beer cans that are being tossed at us. I would just kind of like give them a look.
That's how we've navigated a lot of my life, not just avoiding throws, but like when I was in elementary school, I would very often befriend the largest person.
That's not a bad strategy.
It was a great strategy. I mean, they were very often nerds, so we had things to talk about. If they weren't, I would like help do homework. And I didn't really get bullied in elementary school or even middle school. So, I would say that I've developed some survival strategies. Yeah. Finding people that are willing to like beat people up for you. Yeah, that's way better than trying to beat people up.
Oh yeah. No, I would go for less than 10,000. I would go for the price of the ticket and
don't negotiate yourself down.
Well, okay. Let me be clear. I would be willing to go for $5,000, and we could negotiate, further down the line, because you got to think tickets are going to be ridiculous for it anyway, regardless of where you're going to end up sitting.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be price the ticket plus for it to be considered an actual prize, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. But yeah. I wouldn't. Now, let's be clear here. I would be wearing the gear to the game. I wouldn't be wearing it in the city beforehand, like to get a sandwich or something. No, I would wear it to the game.
You would show up to the stadium and then just pop it on and walk right in.
Exactly, because as it turns out, walking around Philadelphia is going to just be like dealing with Philadelphia Eagles fans on Twitter. So, like, why would you want to do that in person? So,
plus, I mean, you're out in the open. There's fewer bodies to get in the way of like a shot. Yeah. I mean, of a beer can shot. Not like I don't think they're going to shoot you.
No.
Really, if they're going to kill you, it'll be very unintentional.
They're more concerned about the people punching the horses, quite frankly.
Right, yeah.
Greasing the poles and punching the horses. No, I would totally do it.
In the open, there's less blockage in the way of a flying beer can, so it might even be somewhat safer in the stadium. Who knows?
Yeah, and if nothing else, we'd have something to complain about when we got back to Minneapolis and record a quick like post-mortem show and be like, yeah, so this was our experience.
I called that one a post-mortem, given how dangerous it might be.
Hey, well, yeah, actually, that would probably end up being the show title, post-mortem. But yeah, James lived a wonderful life. He lived as he died, screaming at Eagles fans. And I'm not going to top that, so that is going to be the end of this week's show. Arif, do you have anything to plug for us before we're out?
Not really. I'm going to do a Kirk Cousins piece pretty soon. I just keep getting caught up in, like charting his old games and stuff like that. I just got to get around to writing it. So that should be coming down the pike relatively soon. If you have enjoyed this episode and would like to donate to the show, you can do so in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. Again, we appreciate you guys sending us stuff over the off season. It really helps kind of keep the morale up, kind of remind us that we do have listeners that really do appreciate the show. So please keep on keeping on and spreading the word about Norse Code. So that is going to be it. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you so much for listening. And just remember, as Sheldon Richardson is now experiencing, you do have to just go out and demand excellence and demand Norse Code. And we'll see you soon.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, NorseCodePodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.